All right. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to our next book club. This is kind of a series we do every Thursday where we go over a book of the month. We have gone through several different books this year, but it's May, so we're starting a new book. We just went through the book of James, and it was a lot of fun. It was really good. This month, we're doing something a little bit different. We're going on a book that I think is going to, I hope, challenge us. I think it's going to be unique. We're actually reading this book as a staff and as elders at our church. And so this book is called Surprise the World, Five Habits of Highly Missional People by Michael Frost. And I think it's going to be really good. I think it's going to be really interesting. And so it's going to be a little bit different this month. Usually you'll see four of us in there, but Ryan had to bow out this month. So he'll be back probably in June. So it'll just be Brandon and I tonight. Corey usually will join, but he's got some stuff going on tonight that he can't. So just Brandon and I talking about it. But as always, you are welcome to join into the discussion. You're welcome to get the book yourself. You're welcome to check it out, anything that you would like as a part of this. So again, I'm really kind of excited about this. Let me kind of get you up before we bring Brandon on, kind of on the point of this and kind of the point of this book. He says in the intro that really kind of the point of this, the key to equipping believers. So the idea of this book is how can we go from just regular people to people who are passionate and equipped to share the gospel, to share the good news of Jesus. And we'll talk about that with Brandon, and like the uncomfortableness of that, and the tendencies of ourselves, and does that come naturally or not natural to you, and all that kind of stuff. But he said that he believes that the key to equip believers to see themselves as sent ones, to foster a series of missional habits that shape our lives and values, and to propel us into the world confidently and filled with hope. So that's my hope as a part of reading this book. It was my hope as part of getting the guys this book is that we're going to have some good discussion about sharing Christ. And we're going to be able to look at some habits that we have, and hopefully by the end of it, that we will be able to do some things that will help us be more confident and propel us with hope, to be able to share the good news of Jesus, that we will feel more comfortable with it. It's never comfortable, it's never easy, but we'll be able to do that. So there's five habits as a part of that. Tonight, we're kind of setting the foundation for those five habits. And over the next couple of weeks, through the month of May, we'll actually be looking at each of those habits and how to apply them in our lives. But I do want to go ahead and bring Brandon in as a part of this. What's up, dude? I'm glad you're the one who's left hanging with me during all this. Okay, so before we get into this, sharing the gospel is what? What do you, when you picture share? Okay, okay. I want you to give me what your brain says, not what you know is the right answer. But when I tell you that we are called to share the gospel, what would that have kind of stirred up in your mind?
I mean, actively going out and talking to somebody about Christ
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
in a quick nutshell.
Okay, so what are your experiences now? Because I know we both have experiences.
Yeah.
We grew up in the same youth ministry. We both went on mission trips. What is your experiences in kind of that area?
Um, I mean, it can be challenging mentally because you don't know how they're going to respond, and I mean, it's the cliche stuff. Like you don't
Right.
know if you're going to be able to answer all their questions.
Uh-huh.
Something that I've learned over the years and tried to remind myself in those circumstances or situations is that it's okay not to have the answer, but like it's okay not to know the answer, but you know how to find the answer, whether that's going to somebody for wise counsel, whether that's looking in the scriptures or you know talking to somebody in the church. Just because you don't have the answer for the person doesn't mean you can't get them the answer.
Yeah, that's good. Now,
It's
what?
a hard thing to remember in the moment.
So I know you've done some of this in high school. When did it? What did it kind of look like when you go on mission trips as a student?
Mhm. I mean, kind of the typical stuff. I mean, you go out and I mean, you probably on this, but yeah, you go to families
Uh huh.
and rural areas and all that. I
Uh
mean,
huh. Was
as you know, I'm an introvert, so I mean, I'm not the one who's
uh-huh.
jumping to the front of the line to talk to these
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know, I'm
And
not.
it was a lot of like door to door or
It
street
was, yeah,
evangelism,
tracks, that
and
kind of stuff. You know,
yeah,
the
yeah,
handouts.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Wait, well, I've used the EvangeCube before,
Yeah,
and so that's
yeah.
like when I say sharing. the gospel, that's what I picture, right? Because that's kind of
Okay,
my
yeah, yeah, yeah.
background as a part of it is some of the trips we had in other countries, whether Mexico or Germany,
Hmm.
and they're all different, and they're all different ways to engage with people, or even mission trips here locally in the States and in the Dallas area, and sharing it with the Evangel Cube, and it's usually to kids, and you ask them, do you want to accept Jesus? Do you want to put your faith in Jesus? And they raise their hand, but you don't know if it's real. Is it not real? And it's just this whole thing.
Hmm.
And I can remember one time we were on a mission trip to Mexico. We came back and our kids were on fire. I mean, it was an incredible trip. They were challenged. None of these kids were out sharing the gospel before. That was the whole point of the trip. We were going door to door. We were sharing the gospel with translators. It was really good. We saw God moving, and our kids came back on fire. And like, we want to do this. I'm like, okay, well, let's go. On a Saturday morning, we went out and we went door to door in
Hmm.
just outside of Dallas, near Mesquite, Texas, and it was awful. It was awful. It was. We realized really quickly that it's very different to share the
Yeah,
gospel in the States as it is
absolutely.
anywhere outside of the country. Because as Americans, the door is just naturally open to us and there's so much respect, and not
Yeah,
because we're
yeah.
Americans, but just general respect for people that if they would give us time to say something. And it was so different. And we go in the States and we're like, I don't want to talk to you. Okay, that's good.
Mm.
We move on, or they listen and like, no, I'm good. And so it's just very, very different. But that's kind of when I think about sharing the gospel. That's probably like the thing that comes to my head the quickest is that. And
Mm.
we've spent a lot of time
Mm.
in our church trying to break that as like the only idea as part of what it looks like to share the gospel. Because, and this book talks about it, which we'll talk about in a second, that's really easy for some people to do, just naturally step up and share the gospel, and it's really
Mm.
difficult for other people to do. But yeah, so again, kind of the goal of this book is to develop in people, into believers, this natural confidence and opportunity and hope to kind of be able to have conversations about Christ with others.
Mm.
So as we get into this, it labels us as two different kinds of people. All right. It labels, and I know your answer, but it labels as you are either an evangelist or you are everyone else. All right. So an evangelist is someone that just has a passion to share Jesus. And I would say
Yeah,
a gift to share Jesus. That it comes very natural to them, that
yeah.
they're driven by it and all that kind of stuff. Is that you?
No, not at all.
Okay, good, good. Well, and again, what I loved about this book, and one of my favorite lines in it, you may have even underlined this, is on, oh, where is it? I don't even know which page. So I know I didn't underline it, I guess, but essentially he says that there are evangelists and then there's everyone else, and that most people are everyone else, which is just people that get nervous and they get scared and that are
Mm.
overwhelmed by the concept of sharing the gospel with other people. So that's you. What's interesting is that's actually me too. I'm not. So I obviously come at it from a different spot because I share the gospel a lot as a pastor and
Mm.
as a part of my messages and stuff. But I don't like if I'm in a one-on-one conversation, unless you trigger something that allows me to go into like that explanation mode, I don't just naturally want to ask you questions to get you to the point of talking about faith.
Yeah.
I want to hear your story and I want to know what makes you you, but I don't that's something that's uncomfortable for me is trying to figure out how to do that. So I would actually say that I'm not an evangelist at heart because that doesn't come really natural to me
Hmm.
wanting to do that. And I only know that because I've got a staff person on our staff, our executive pastor of ministries, that is 100% an evangelist. And man, he is pushing us as a staff and as a church all the time to be doing more to equip our people and to share the gospel. And I love it. He has like conversations with people every day, not about Jesus, but he's got this really cool thing where he's got 5 or 6 people that he's praying for, and then he just goes up and he has different. He goes, "Hey, tell me, um, what's your what's your idea of faith? Like, what's your background of faith?" Right, and that's a very uncomfortable. I can imagine if you were to ask that to somebody, it'd be like, "Oh my gosh, what? That's I don't want to go do that." but it's like just a natural conversation for him, and he's just so
Yeah.
unarming and or disarming, and it just hits great. That's not me. That's not me. So, what are some
Yeah.
things that stuck out to you in this first chapter? Living questionable lives.
Just kind of that concept
Mm-hmm.
of, do, like it says, do the unexpected. Don't be afraid to explain um, why we have hope or confidence. Something I wrote down is not being afraid to explain why we have hope or confidence when it may not be the norm for a given situation. So if you are under or experiencing some sort of trial or something that you're going through, um, like being able to communicate that to people, but in parallel with saying, but I have confidence that,
Mm-hmm.
God's in control of this, and trying to put that aspect of it
Mm-hmm.
on it.
Yeah, I thought that was really good. And he kind of says that top of page 5, that's as so we're going to speak to non-evangelist people because I feel like anybody who watches this, and certainly the four of us are probably that way, that our job is to, on top of page 5, is to pray like crazy and conduct ourselves in such a way as to provoke unbelievers to question their beliefs,
Mm.
to be able to enter into a dialogue. Have you ever had that? Have you ever had somebody ask, the thing we'll say from the stage a lot is, well, why aren't you struggling with that, or why are you responding in that way, or why do you have hope in the midst of this hard situation?
Hmm.
Have Again, I work in a church, right? So these are not
Yeah.
things that are, what's been your experience in faith conversations, whether they're aggressive, whether they're
Hmm.
opening, whether have you had any of those in your 20 plus years of real world life and work in
Yeah.
a secular environment?
I mean, not at, going back and as we're reading through the first couple of chapters here, just reevaluating that, that span of my life. Not as many as I would have thought that I would be able to remember.
Yeah.
And that's kind of disheartening a little bit that I haven't put myself in those positions, whether that's proactively just reaching out and talking to people about it or instigating it, or when the opportunity is there to kind of turn that conversation that way, not doing that,
Mm-hmm.
being, worried about doing that or feeling, unprepared or whatever the case may be. But I think that's actually what stood out to me the most, which is good to have that realization, but still hurts a little
It
bit
does.
to make that
Yeah.
realization.
No, no, no. It definitely does. I
I mean,
know.
so,
And
that's dumb conversations like that, but
yeah,
yeah,
and we'll
nothing
get
like,
into it in chapter 2 of my weakness as a part of that. But yeah, and I think for me, it's it's the conversations of, hey, will you pray for this? Like, and I
mm,
know you're not a faith person, but the fact that you're asking me, and again, I worked with you for a couple of years or a year or so, a little bit less than, in the secular world, and then I went and worked for a construction company for about a year and a half before I came back into ministry. And it was overwhelming, the lostness of and the
yeah.
hopelessness of kind of the world around me, but it was really fun to have opportunities for people to go, hey, will you pray about this? Or, hey, what do you, and even to just asking my advice on things, I knew what they
Mm,
were doing. They were asking for someone with my point of view because they know that my point of view is different maybe than their point of view. And so they wanted my input and they wanted my voice, whether or not they took it or not, wasn't really kind of the goal. It was just they wanted something. And so I think one of
right.
the things I think we do have more conversations, and it's like you said, it's trying to be intentional with those. I think
Mm.
is where that conviction starts to come in. So
Yeah, I have the audiobook right now, so I don't have the text in front of me. What was that part that you read? Something about how we conduct ourselves
yeah, yeah.
to
So
spark questions. What was that?
yeah, so he says believers, that our job is to first pray like crazy and to two, conduct ourselves in word and in deed in such a way as to provoke unbelievers to question their
Yeah.
beliefs and enter into an evangelistic dialogue. And he gets that from First Peter 3:15, where he says, "Always
Hmm.
be prepared to give an answer for everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have," which is where I see it the most, right? Which is, why do you
Yeah.
have hope in any situation? Because the reality is, we're the only ones with hope. with the true hope because of Christ. And so that was one of the things I wrote was, am I showing hope? And I
Hmm.
think that sometimes is convicting, right? Because it's the challenge of, am I actually showing people that Christ has changed my life? And as we
Hmm.
talked about in James, that no matter what is going on, whether trials or temptations, that I am pushing to live for God, and I'm pushing to be steadfast in my faith, because I know that God is doing something with me. And that's when we produce. That's when we show hope. But do we actually do that?
Yeah.
I think
But I
that's
also
hard.
think that's, yeah, I agree. But I also think that's probably one of the easiest ways, especially for somebody who like me who's not going to just, go out and knock on doors and things. But it's probably one of the easiest ways, but the easiest to do, but also easiest to ignore of like conducting ourselves differently. It,
Hmm.
it's it's easy to do that in the sense of I just stand by my convictions. Maybe if I'm around somebody who's, yeah, talking about certain subject matters that I don't agree with, maybe steer the conversation directly or respond to that or something like that. That's not difficult to do, and it doesn't have to be uncomfortable
Hmm.
like it feels like when I'm sharing the gospel, but also it's just easy just to fall into I'll just ignore it. I'm not gonna say anything.
Right, right.
And
Well,
I'm just gonna I'll just join in or whatever.
and I think the challenge is that, and certainly from a staff standpoint, we've had these conversations that there's this balance of wanting people to share the gospel, but not making them feel guilty if it doesn't come natural, which I think this book is
Mm,
doing a really good job of. But then leaning too heavy on what we call relational evangelism, which is just this, oh, I'm just going to live my life for Jesus,
yeah.
and they're going to come to know Jesus without me saying anything. And like that's the
Hmm.
extreme side of it. And what he's saying is, no, no, no. We want you to live this evangelistic life. His life that
Hmm.
ultimately points people to God, even if they don't know that it's God, they know that something is different about you. But then
Yeah.
you're also prepared to give an answer and that you're praying for opportunities. And I think that,
Yeah.
like you said, it's really easy to live a godly life, um, but for that to be ineffective because we're not actually like putting that on display
Hmm.
as
Right. Right.
publicly, where we're making it private. So,
Yeah.
and I thought some of the things that he said on how to train kind of your mind. What's up, Jay? How to train your mind for this kind of gospel thing is, having questions, that having conversations about Jesus when maybe how they're dealing with suffering or
Mm,
why they spend their vacations serving the poor. I think it's a super good one. Why they've opened their home to refugees or foster care, things like that.
mm,
Why they're fasting during Lent. What they've made career choices that allow them to contribute to the greater social good. I know that for me, that specifically has always been a question of, well, why are you a pastor? Like you could make a whole lot more money, you could do a whole lot more stuff, and so
yeah.
it's opened the door for me to have conversations. Or, again, I plan mission trips, so that one doesn't work for me. But that for people that I know, volunteers that go on mission trips and they go and they're raising money to, they put
Mm,
$22,000 of their own money in and raise money to go halfway across the world and take an entire week of their vacation to serve people. And that's like a shocking thing for people to like. Why would you do that? So
yeah.
there's some really practical ways that we can do it, which I think is really good.
Yeah.
Anything else stick out to you in that first chapter of kind of living that questionable life that makes other people curious?
I think the only thing that I wrote down is I think in the beginning where he just says, we don't all have to be pastors and missionaries, but everybody should be ready to provide the reason for our hope. And I
Yeah,
think making sure that I am prepared to do that, if the situation arose.
yeah. No, I totally agree. Jay, give me just a second here. And I think for me, the last thought on chapter one is that Paul insists that it says on page 12 if you pull up the book later, but Paul insists that Christians live this way in order to make the teaching of the church attractive. And that's such a cool way to think about it. That,
Mm,
and I think we've had these conversations, right? That one of the things. that I think has allowed me at points to have a voice in people's lives is that they see the way that I live, right? And I'm not your buttoned up pastor that's in a suit and tie every day, and I'm just a normal guy, total failure at points, total goofball at points, does a lot of dumb things, but has a lot of fun. And that when people see my life, and then when I get opportunities to talk about my faith, it's like, oh, okay, I see why that makes sense. And that I think that the way that we live can be an opportunity and give us opportunities to make the teaching of the church, the teaching of Christ, attractive to other people, which I thought was really good.
Mm.
So, all right. So before we move on to chapter 2, Jay, let me see what you said. So I'm doing a thing for my school where we choose a song that associates with our personal religion and gets other religious thoughts and opinions on if that's okay with you. I was wanting to know if I could get your Christian view and perspective on a song. Yeah. Jay, send it to me. We're going to talk about the next, that's cool. Yeah. Let's talk about it, Jay. We're going to do this next chapter real quick, but you can whisper me that link to the song or just type it in to the chat there and we'll take a look at it after this next chapter. We only got one more left. So, all right. So chapter 2 kind of is laying the framework for these new habits, right? That's laying the framework for what we're going to talk about in the rest of the book. And just so everybody kind of knows, the 5 habits, I've got to find them on the page, are bless, eat, listen, learn, and scent. And we'll talk about those kind of as we go. But what do you think are, and it kind of talks about it a little bit, what are good habits and bad habits in our spiritual lives? And kind of the example it gives is that we can have good habits, which is like a quiet time, right? Or, but then that can turn into a bad habit when it's kind of, we do it unconsciously. And so we're like, oh yeah, we pray, but we don't really mean our prayers. We're not really thinking about our prayers, or we're just saying, God, thanks, for this, but we don't really mean it, if that makes sense. So, do you feel like some good habits and some bad habits that you've experienced spiritually over the years?
Um, I think a bad habit, um, maybe it stems from lockdown and pandemic days. Uh, Watching church online.
Oh, that's good. Oh, that's
I
good.
just
That's
feel
a
like
whole nother discussion.
it's such a cop out and a
Mm-hmm.
make me feel good type of thing that I feel like if I'm not that, of course there's gonna be situations where that just it makes sense in the moment or that span of life, but for me personally, I think that I definitely absolutely use that as I'd rather just sleep in and kind of
Yeah.
pop the TV on for an hour.
Yeah. No, yeah, we have a lot of conversations about this as staff, and it was good and it was necessary, and we even like
Yeah.
carried into it. We did a lot of really creative things during the pandemic, but it became, as we came back, what we found was that's not how you build a relationship. And
Right.
God created the church to be a people that are in community with one another. You can't be in community just on a
Hmm.
screen. You can build friendships, you can build relationships, but you can't actually be in community. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really good one. That's a really good. What's a good habit spiritually that you've had?
Um, I think of something specific. I mean, something that I had for a while, maybe a couple years recently, but then dropped off last year that I'd like to get back into is I used to arrive at work like 45 minutes early,
Mm-hmm.
just intentionally so that I have a gap of time that I have no use for outside of just reading,
Yeah,
praying,
yeah,
journaling, all that kind of stuff. So I would intentionally go to the parking lot early and not have anything to do specifically for that. And that was a good habit that, it made me feel like my growth in my relationship with God was so much stronger and it progressed so much faster during that period. Um, so yeah, that's a good habit that I need to get back
that's
into.
good. No, that's really good. That's really good. I think for me, a bad habit actually is tithing. So it'd be giving money to the church, right? But not it's tithing that I give, so it automatically comes out of my check, right? So it comes out the first of the month. And the reason is because I would forget, and I would forget
Yeah,
to. I'd have a checkbook, which I never have. Like I'm 38, right? I don't carry around
checkbook.
checks. I know, right? I have a checkbook still from like 15 years of marriage, like when we first got married. but I would write a check on Sundays, right? When I first started at the church. But I would forget and I'd be like 2 months behind, then that money's gone. And so I
Yeah.
just started direct
Yeah.
depositing. It's really good and it's very
Mm.
helpful. But I never think about that money anymore. So there's no
Mm-hmm.
spiritual connection to my being obedient to God and giving back to Him. There's no spiritual
Mm-hmm.
connection to it anymore. It's just it comes. Now, I would rather it be that way so that I'm at least doing it. But one of the things I think I miss is praying, because what I would do is I would pray and I would go, just Lord, would you bless this money? Would you use it to whatever the church needs and however it needs to use it to make your name great? And then that was great. Now, like I again, I don't think about it at all until I get my end of the year
Yeah.
giving. It's like, oh no, like yeah, I have been giving to the church, and that's good, but I think that's a habit that was good that's kind of turned to this weird, awkward
Mm-hmm.
one. Um, I think
No,
for
that's good
me,
though. I've never really thought about that in that perspective about
yeah,
how you do because we had direct deposit for our tithe. I mean,
yeah,
most people do now. But yeah, you're right. You don't really even think about it anymore
hmm
about the act of giving to the church and
yeah.
what that represents.
I
I've never
need
thought about
to.
that before.
I don't remember it when times like this. Like I remember it right now, but I won't remember it other times. I've been wanting to set an alarm for the first Sunday of the month when I know that
Yeah.
check comes out, and or even just the second day of the month when I know that check has come out, and just to pray to go, Lord, would you
Hmm.
use this money? It's something I need to do just so I'm praying over that
Yeah, no,
money.
that's good. I like that.
So I think a good habit for me um, has been when I am intentionally conscious about praying about little things and constantly throughout the day. And so I'm going to God with things, and I'm having this consistent communication. And so sometimes it's long, sometimes it's short. But I think it keeps me grounded and focused on God, so that I'm seeking His direction rather than just going about it and then going, oh God, I need your help with this. When actually I feel like I'm walking more in step because I'm having more communication. I'm having more conversation. I'm constantly trying to focus on that relationship. So I think that's a big one for me.
Mm.
But good. Okay, so this one just talked about, again, it talked a lot about habits. And one of the things that I absolutely loved in this chapter, maybe my favorite thing that it said, was if our only habits as Christians are going to church and attending meetings, they're not going to connect us with unbelievers nor invite their curiosity about our faith. Man, as a pastor, even that hit. Because there is not a better way to phrase what I think we struggle with as Christians than that we go to church on Sundays and then we might attend Wednesday nights or other meetings or whatever, and then we go away. And we've talked about
Yep.
this as a staff. We've talked about how do we engage people on Monday through Saturday with what they heard on Sunday to apply it to their lives. There's lots of
Hmm.
different strategies and stuff, but man, that's hard. And I feel like for me that hits close, that there are times when I'm out of rhythm, that it's in part because all I'm doing is I'm showing up on Sundays and
Hmm.
Wednesdays, and my other days outside of those hours are not
Yeah.
affected by what I'm learning. So
No, yeah, I completely agree. There's many weeks where my faith during that week starts and ends with the church door.
yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
walk
that's
in
really
and
good.
it starts, and I leave, and then and I'm done for the week,
Man,
unfortunately.
I'm gonna need to make a T-shirt of that.
Yeah.
Don't let your faith start and end with the door. That's good. No, that's really really good. Okay, so he kind of goes on and talks about these five habits, right? So bless, which is
Mm.
being generous. Eat, which is being hospitable. Listen, which is being spirit led, kind of like I was just talking about. Learning, which is being Christ like, and then sent, which is being missional. And it kind of goes through different opportunities and examples. What do you think is a strength and which one is a weakness for you in terms of your spiritual walk? Again, walking into this is why I kind of wanted to do this one tonight,
Hmm.
and then we'll talk through the habits over the next couple of weeks, and then hopefully at the end of the month we'll have a better direction and stuff.
Trying to think of his strength. Um,
Okay, so
well,
as you're thinking, let me just read the example.
yeah,
He
yeah.
says, So for bless, he says, and this is kind of a goal or whatever. I will bless three people
Mhm.
this week, at least one person who's not a member of my church. And so blessing is kind of, oh, it's not in there on that one, but being generous as a part of that. Eating, I will eat with three people this week, one who's not a member of our church. Listen, I'll listen. Spend at least one period of the week listening for the Spirit's voice. Learn, I will spend at least one period of the week learning Christ, which would be reading your Bible, studying. And then sent, I will journal throughout all the week, all the days I altered others towards Christ, kind of directed people towards Christ.
Yeah. I think one of the strengths, maybe right now, is maybe the listening part. At least in the last few months, as we've been doing a lot of these books, I think that's become a more of a strength than it was previously. And it's not as often as I'd like it to be, but it's certainly at moments throughout a given week.
Yeah,
I'm able to, spend time doing that.
that's good. That's good.
Maybe a weakness for me is probably the bless three people or eat with others. And part of that is being the introvert and just
Yep, yep.
not wanting to proactively initiate
Man,
conversations like that.
and what blew my mind, and so when you and I worked together at this website company, I pictured it like, okay, and this is going to sound so dumb to anyone who's ever worked in this, but one of my dreams was to work in a cubicle, right? So I'm the extrovert, right, of this relationship.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
definitely the extrovert of this friendship, and I just dreamed where I just thought like this looks like, so it's like grass is always greener on the other side, and this just looked really fun. Um, and so I did it, and I was shocked by the fact that you just put on your headphones and you don't talk to
Hmm.
anybody, and you're there for 9 hours and you just sit at your desk and you don't do anything. You might talk to people at lunch, but a lot of times you just go eat in your car and then come back and there's no conversations. And I was like, this is weird. I don't,
Yeah.
this is not what I thought. So, like, even though the fact that you work at a place, I mean, I just went to your office last week, that there are
Yeah.
100 people there on property, that it is still easy for you to avoid people with
Hmm.
meals. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's really
Yeah.
good. So for me, I would say a strength is I eat with people. I don't eat with people outside of my church. I don't have a lot of, one of the goals that
Mhm.
I have this year is to have more relationships with people outside of my church. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously as a pastor, everything I do is surrounded by my church, right? The friends that I have, the things that I do, the goals, the office, all that is surrounded by
Hmm.
people at my church. But I do lunch meetings and coffee a lot, and it's for me as a pastor, it's primarily because like that is the best way to have conversations with people is over a
Hmm.
meal, over coffee, because it relaxes people. The
Yeah.
time kind of goes a little bit slower, and so you have more opportunity to just talk. And so I that's something that I absolutely love. I am always looking to have
Hmm.
meetings on coffee or food. So that one, I think for me. Um, I mean, certainly scent is, I don't journal at all. But I think the whole point of that is, am I thinking about and being intentional or being aware of ways that I've pointed people to Christ? Again, I think that's something I struggle with because I don't have a lot of relationships with people outside of uh, Christian, faith, Christian values,
Yeah.
and outside of my church. And so I've got to do a better job with that. So,
Hmm.
yeah. All right. What else stood out to you, man? Anything else in this chapter?
Uh, Let me think. I mean, one of the things that it said, I think it was early on, was you are what you do and not what you say you'll do.
Yeah,
I'm
that's good.
1000% guilty of that.
Uh-huh.
I probably every day. There's so many times where I'm like, okay, in my mind, I'm gonna do this. Even on Sunday mornings, is a great example where I was talking about earlier. Is during the sermon, I'm thinking of things like, oh, I'm gonna do this week, and I'm gonna tackle this. I forgot about that book I wanted to read. I'm gonna read that, and so many things that I want to do and that I say in my head that I'm gonna do, but it's all meaningless if I don't actually do it.
Yeah. Ah, that's good. Listen, as a pastor, I appreciate the honesty that you're not listening to me. Um, because I can see it from the stage. I can
You
see
spark a lot of good
when,
ideas.
yeah, I can see, yeah, no, no, no. I
Putting them
can
in action.
100% see people just totally checking out, being like,
Yeah.
okay, they're out. here's no good. I got to make eye contact with people that are looking at me. Um, yeah, no, that's really good. And I think that's, and again, I think it's that Sunday versus Monday through Saturday faith is when you walk out the door, does your faith end? And so we say we're going to do a lot of things in our heart, even, and then we don't actually do those. So I think it's really good.
Mm,
For me, the last thing would be he says in page 24 that to pastors, I say, you don't have to preach these values if you're fostering the habits. That I think about it even with my family and my kids is what am I showing them? Am I showing them someone who is generous, who's hospitable, who seeks to bless others,
mm,
who seeking opportunities just to have a conversation about faith. And then when I do, telling my kids that I did, not in like an arrogant way, but just in a, hey, this is what happened. We
yeah,
started doing this
yeah.
thing as a family every night we call peaks and valleys. And so every night we say, and we go around the table and what was one good thing that happened to you and one bad thing that happened to you today. And so it's been really good. But a couple of weeks ago, I got to share that this guy randomly called our church looking for somebody to pray with his mom who's on hospice and in her home and has no connection to us, no idea what his faith value, like nothing. He just needed somebody, a pastor to go pray with his mom. And so I was the one that was in town and available. I said, absolutely. So I went and I spent an hour with his mom and just prayed with her and talked to her about life and talked to her about her faith and talked to her about heaven and talked to her about Christ and all this sort of stuff. And I prayed with her and it was really good. And I went home and I was like, I've got to tell my kids this. Like, this is the kind of thing I want them to know that their dad does. They see some of
Mm,
the fun stuff of being a pastor and being up at the church or doing goofy videos or things like that. But like, this is what I enjoy the most. And so during that time, I was able to say, I got to go pray with this lady who's dying and I got to go just sit by her bed, and they had so many questions. Well, what was she doing in the living room? What about this? What about? But it's like I know that kind of thing. I hope that it sticks in their mind to go, okay, my
mm,
dad is cares about those who are hurting, cares about those who are lost, cares about those who don't have someone to care for them, and that's
mm,
that's a big thing. So I just thought that was really good, a reminder to go.
yeah.
And it's the exact same thing you said. Like it's actually more effective if I don't preach about it, if I'm doing it. And
Mm,
then when I do preach about it, if they know that I'm doing it, then it's even more effective. But I have to be doing the
yeah.
things. I can't just say one thing and then not do it. So it's
Yeah.
good. Cool.
No, I agree with that though, and I think especially I don't think it is prideful when you're trying to tell your kids about those kind of situations that you're in, especially as a pastor. I think that's one, it's their reinforcing what you're teaching them, and it kind of
Hmm.
reinforces that with the actions that you're doing outside of that.
Yeah.
But I also think it's good habit for them. Like we try like once a month we'll each one of the kids we'll let them like pick a small donation somewhere.
Hmm.
And so the act of generosity, like
That's
trying to get
good.
them in the habit of like each month we'll rotate the kids, but they'll all get to select one. I'll give them like a few options or something, and then we'll have them select one.
That's
It's
really
something
good.
I want to. We haven't done it a whole lot recently, but it's something that I want to start doing as the year goes on.
Yeah. That's really good, man. I love that. And I think for kids especially, it just makes the things that they're learning in church come to life when you're doing it at home. And they know that it's real or not real. And so doing it and it being real to your family, I think just absolutely ignites a fire for them. And I have certainly seen how that as a youth pastor for 20 years, that certainly plays itself out, I think, over time. So cool. All right, dude. Anything else with that with these first two chapters?
I don't think so.
All right. All right. Sounds good, man. All right. I'll be back in a minute. Okay. So thank you again for watching that part of the stream. We'll be back next week, next Thursday, I think Thursday, maybe Friday, with chapters 3 and 4. And we'll still be talking about the habits bless and eat and why those matter and why it's important as a part of our faith. So give me a second, Jay. I'm not leaving, but give me a second here. All right. So see you next week.